welcome. So welcome everybody. This is our first ever time we've tried to run a Q&A session about the START assessment. To give it just a bit of background, so I'm Najette, I'm ST7 and I sat the START in October online. So I'm also going to kind of give you my experiences with Abby, but I also on the London School of Pediatrics Education Subcommittee, so I'm wearing 2 hats today. And essentially we ran quite a successful online event pre the October sitting that was fully booked, and we were a bit overwhelmed of how much people kind of got out of it. And it got put on the YouTube channel, and it's had, I think, about 1,000 views. I mean, it's gone a bit mad. And so what we decided to do is, rather than reinventing the wheel and repeating that, given that most of the content is staying the same, that we would just do a Q&A session with people where you just come with your queries, your concerns, that we can try and answer between us all. We've got quite a lovely group of people here that, and between us, we can kind of think about things. So if you want to either put your hand up and we'll answer questions, or put it in the chat, that's great. But there are 3 things I think I need to signpost you to. 1 is the YouTube video, so we'll put a link in the chat in a second of how you get that. 2 is the Trello board, which has got so much amazing information on there, which frankly everyone should have, regardless of if they're sitting START. I would say it's just got great resources on there. And thirdly is the WhatsApp group, which is a huge kind of activity of questions and peer-on-peer support and people asking things about what to do on the lead up, and some kind of pairing up of how to prepare. But before I kind of stop talking, I just want people to introduce themselves who have kindly given up their evening to kind of facilitate and be here to answer questions. So if I go to Anne first to introduce herself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Anu Prita. I'm a consultant neonatologist in London here, and Deputy Head of School TPD.
Wonderful. Thank you for spending your evening with us. If I move on to Jane.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jane Runnacles. I'm a general paediatrician at St George's Hospital, and I'm a TPD for education. So I have the pleasure of working with Najette and the other guys from the Trainees Committee put on this and other education courses.
Marvellous. Thank you, Jane. And over to Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue Laurent, and I am a general paediatrician and a TPD in London. And I've also been doing START as an assessor since the very, very beginning. And I've done it a couple of times online as well. So I know a little bit about what it feels like.
Fantastic.
And I've got Pilates at 7.
Okay.
Just to let you know.
Great. Okay. Pilates is very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Abby.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm a paediatric registrar ST8 in London, and I work with Najette and these guys on the LSP Education Committee, and also have done START in October in the virtual sitting. So hopefully we'll be able to answer some of your queries and calm your nerves.
Lovely. Thank you, Abby. And Marette.
Hi guys, I'm just here as a kind of general support. I'm Marette at ST7 in Pediatrics, and I'll be managing the chat and posing the questions to all the experts here.
Thank you, Marette. Love to have you back. She also helped me do the START, set it up in the one in the summer. And not last but not least, Katie, who's been doing a sterling job in navigating MS Teams. Thank the Lord, because I'm not very good on it.
Hi, I'm Katie. I am part of the London School of Pediatrics Education subgroup, and I am admin support. Just a flag that we are recording. It will be going on the YouTube channel, so if you don't want to be recorded, keep your video off, and you can ask questions in the chat rather than speaking if you would prefer.
That is marvellous, and you're definitely more than admin support. Right then, so we're going to cross over to Anna, who's going to take over and kind of start the evening off from a kind of school perspective. Go for it.
I think you already have the slides from the last session that you ran in October last year. And so I'm not really going to add very much, except to say several things. Obviously, we know START's now virtual, and it's compulsory. You all know what START stands for, right? So Specialty Training Assessment of readiness for tenure. I think they really needed an acronym that would fit, because tenure is not something that we use as an American term for a consultant. So basically, it's to kind of appraise your readiness or a trainee's readiness to step up and undertake consultant-like activities. And it's meant to be really more the principles rather than particular clinical knowledge that's being tested. It's a formative assessment, not a summative assessment. It is not an exam, and you do not pass or fail START. You basically have areas to develop, and areas, and the real important thing for START is for trainees and when you're working with your educational supervisors to look at it as determining where your strengths are, and where you've got developmental points. And recently, and Sue will back that up, that with the move to the virtual START, I think it's definitely improved as far as the feedback is concerned. It's more structured, it's more detailed, and it's really, I think, more practical and helpful. And a lot of the trainees have said, you know, I really thought I was a good communicator, and I'm really glad that START sort of, you know, highlighted that as being one of my strengths, and I did really well at that station. And, you know, conversely, there's an area that I always struggle with, and this is something I'm going to work on. And you get a lot of very good feedback. So it's not an exam, and I think if you approach it with an open mind and wanting to sort of make it work for you, then it will work for you. So there are 12 stations and each station is about 8 minutes long. There are lots of generic stations, but if you're a subspecialty trainee, then there will be some subspecialty stations. And there was discussion today at the heads of school, the college heads of school meeting, about whether that is removed, you know, the subspecialty stations, because you've got CSACs now and they do their own annual review, and maybe they're the ones that should focus on the subspecialty aspects, and START should just focus on the generic aspects of being a consultant rather than having specific clinical stations relating to your subspecialty. So the sequence does change, but I had a slide and I can't find it now, but it basically there's stuff on handovers, critical appraisal, safeguarding, prescribing. There seems to be one that sort of does catch people up. And I think it's not that we don't know how to prescribe, it's the fact that doing it under those conditions sometimes is difficult, because in real life, you know, you're going to sort of take your time, go to a quiet corner and really concentrate on getting the prescription right. So the main thing really is the feedback, is the feedback that you get from your assessors, and it's detailed. It really is. In fact, I think, you know, spending a lot of time going through that and then discussing with your educational supervisor is key. It is actually key to making it work for you. So feedback will, the results will find its way to your e-portfolio in about 4 to 6 weeks after the assessment. I don't know whether you get a kind of notification or whether it just sort of appears one day. I presume you get an email notification if anything new goes onto your e-portfolio. And then the idea is that once you've had a good look at it yourself, that you arrange to sit down with your educational supervisor and determine, you know, what it meant, and what areas you have to develop yourself or show that you've developed yourself. So we want you as a school to reflect on your START assessment. So we use the word remediation, and I want us to move away from using that. Not really sure that's a great word anyway. I think we should all reflect on it, whether it's gone well or not as well as you expected, whether you've got developmental areas or whether your strengths were great. And so it doesn't matter if you're above expectation in all stations. It's really important that you reflect on what this means for you at your stage of training and in terms of stepping up to consultants. So we want to see that as part of your e-portfolio, and we will be looking for it at ARCP. And definitely will need to see it before you're signed off for your outcome 6, your final ARCP outcome. So it's a mandatory assessment, even though it's not summative. Last year, the college tried to, because of COVID, tried to cancel it and perhaps not run it and just, get trainees through on the say-so of the education supervisors, and the GMC was not having any of that. They really wanted to make sure that the assessment went through. So it's an incredibly important assessment. So please have, once you have determined, what areas you want to work on, it's important then to develop a folder. We call it just maybe start reflection, start folder or something in your e-portfolio. I would put that in your ARCP folder so that it's clear. So because one of the problems we find, especially when you're a very busy trainee, you've got lots of wonderful evidence in your e-portfolio, it makes it difficult then for the ARCP panel to find it. So we do say that please highlight it, put it in your ARCP folder, but signpost us to it. So have something that says start reflection. And there are many ways in which you can do this reflection. And I think I shared the slides, and I'm happy to email the slides again if you want me to. But over the years, what I've done is I've taken 1 or 2 good examples that I've seen from trainee e-portfolios and obviously asked their permission and anonymized the information there. But some people have just sort of done a table, and then they've got learning need identified, how I addressed this, what the evidence was and the data achieved. And some people just have the station, and then they put a little bit of blurb about, summary of what the station was about, just a brief summary, and their reflection on their performance, and if there were any developmental needs in another column, and then action plans, if any. So I think that's a real nice way, and it's really structured and helps you kind of just focus on the nitty-gritty. So I think that's all that I have to say. It's a developmental assessment. It's formulated to aid progression to senior clinical roles. Engage with the process, make it work for you. Don't make it a tick box exercise, and it's not an exam. You don't pass or fail it, and no one's going to say, well, we'll say well done, but no one's going to sort of say, oh my gosh, except to say that sometimes once or twice I've seen trainees where there've been significant concerns raised, and in those situations, thankfully, they're incredibly rare. We've only had 2 over the last 3 years. That's escalated to the head of school, just to make sure that the trainees in the right place are getting support. Yeah, that's it really.
That is super helpful. Maurette, is there any questions coming through the chat before I move?
Yeah, someone's asking about the subspecialty stations. So they are staying in place for now, but there are discussions going forward about taking them out, because, but that would only be for, obviously for the grid trainees. And the reason that came up was you have a few trainees who go into grid in the latter part of their level 3 training, and then they've got very little time to actually develop that subspecialty capabilities, and then sort of a bit of a tussle between getting their generic competencies and capabilities and the subspecialty ones. So it'd be nice if you just really focus on the generic, because that's really the important aspect of being a consultant, whether you're a general pediatrician, a neonatologist, or nephrologist. Those generic aspects are important, and that's what we should be focusing on. So I think it will go, but not this year. Certainly not the dates. And just to say that the dates, they are on the website. Yeah, something I wanted to say. There's lots of stuff on the website. It's absolutely brilliant. The videos and the scenarios with each station. There's a video with David Evans playing the assessor. The next start is the 25th of March, and then you've got 2 dates in April, the 16th and the 22nd of April. And I think the applications have closed for those dates.
Fantastic, thank you. So there was just one question to clarify if it was going to be 12 stations or 10 stations. Jane?
So I think I answered that actually in the chat, that that the virtual was 10, which I assume is going to be the same again this time round, but I'm
on the website, not on the website. So I went onto the website tonight or this afternoon, and it is back. It said they went to 10 for last year, but they're back up to 12.
Okay. And there's just another question about the format, but I guess Abby and Najet, you'll come on to that when you tell us about your experience.
Yeah, it might be a nice way for Sue to come in actually as someone that examines, and then we can kind of take over and do a trainee perspective. How does that sound, Sue?
Good idea. Okay, so as somebody, and we don't examine, we assess.
Error.
Whoops. I completely get that it must feel like an exam to you as trainees. And it's a slip up that we make all the time, but it is an assessment. So if somebody assesses, for me, I really enjoy doing it because every single scenario is a real life case. So somebody has said, oh, that would be a really good one to start. It's a really good consultant sort of conundrum. And a lot of it is about common sense. So we want you to think about, safety will be an issue, safeguarding will be an issue, prioritization. And sometimes trainees who go astray in scenarios are trainees who think we're trying to get them to be perfect and always stick to guidelines. But sometimes it may not be right to stick to a guideline in a certain situation. We want you to be using your common sense in scenarios. And we want you to be performing at a level of a brand new consultant. So seeking help when you need to seek help and thinking on your feet. So for me, the hardest thing is actually the IT side of it, because it's a whole new platform that we're all using. And of course, you can have Wi-Fi problems, your end, their end. You let somebody in, but they're not there to be let in. And you think, oh God, because if I haven't let that person, is it my fault? Is it their fault? And then if they can't come in, am I going to hold everybody up because they haven't come in? So sometimes the whole thing crashes. We've got your phone numbers. So if it does crash, we'll phone you and say, hi, this is Sue. You're supposed to be meeting me, but actually it's okay. We'll do this on the phone. So just bear with us if it all goes a bit crazy. But the support team for us at the college are fantastic. So if anything goes wrong, we've got this thing that's called Slack that some of you may have used. That's another new thing that we had to learn to use. So we have to communicate via Slack. So we've got all these computers up everywhere. Got one computer with Slack on it, one computer with our virtual platform, and we have to type our feedback in 4 minutes. So we're quite concise because then you've got to bring the next person in 4 minutes, and we do our own timing and you're doing your own timing. So it's not like you've got somebody knocking on a door saying, in you come, like we used to. It's all, we've got a clock and we've got to work it out correctly. So bear with us. But when you're actually face to face with us, it does work really well. And it is a conversation one-to-one. And, actually, there have been remarkably few technical hitches. Remember that we're doing the same scenario all day, all of us. So we're having the same conversation with you all day, and we're being completely fair with how we ask. So it's like an interview, and we're completely consistent. We don't expect you to, by any means, to be perfect in all scenarios, because we aren't, as consultants, perfect with all scenarios. It's all about having a conversation and thinking on your feet. So I will leave it there and answer any questions that you may have.
Great. There was one question in the chat that said, how many of the 12 stations are subspeciality? And are all the clinical scenarios on this subspeciality?
I think they're four. I think so.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing I'd like to say is that every station is really useful for preparation to filling in application forms for consultant jobs, for consultant interviews. for thinking about what your developmental needs before you become a consultant. So I'm a real big START advocate. You know, I think that as trainees, you might get really stressed out by doing it. But actually, I've supervised a lot of trainees through START, through consultant preparation, through consultant interviews, successful consultant interviews. And they've said, it was just a really useful opportunity to kind of look at the areas that I know I'm good at, and so I can just put them to one side, like maybe teaching, for example, because teaching is one scenario where you're just teaching a small group of students. And, you know, you probably can do that standing on your feet, but actually there are other things you might think, like for me, you know, evidence-based stuff, really bad at that. And sometimes I get put on that station. And by the way, they don't match up consultants with their own areas of expertise at all. So they're quite likely to think, I'll put Sue on that, and which is quite fair because I'm a normal, ordinary consultant and I'm not an evidence-based champion. So I'm assessing you as I would assess myself. So yes, remember that. You know, we're not going to give you a cardiologist on a cardiology station if you're a general paediatric trainee. Not that there is a cardiology station, but you know.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, so I think most of the other questions at the moment are for the people who have had the prep, who've already done START in this new virtual format, and the questions are all kind of related to that. So, Abby, would you like to step in and give your experience, and then if the questions haven't been answered by your experience, then we can ask you them.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. So the most important thing I would say is absolutely don't panic. I know that as medics and doctors, we're kind of trained to see everything as an exam, and we need to find a way to prepare for things. And I definitely felt like that in the run-up. But having then done the assessment, it really is like a conversation with peers, with consultants, like you might have on the ward, just in a more structured format. And it did feel like that. So I really want to reassure you that you already probably know most of the knowledge that you need for this. But of course, we all like to do a bit of preparation, and completely, as Sue said, all of the preparation and all of the reading that you will do is extremely useful for your last years of registrar training anyway, and really useful for thinking about the skills you need as a consultant and preparing for applications and interviews. So I don't feel like any of the preparation was in any way wasted. I think the most useful thing that I did is to form a small study group. So Najet and I and a couple of our friends had a study group that we used probably from about a month before the exam. And where we could, we just met virtually a couple of times a week for a couple of hours in the evening, and we would just go through scenarios, much like you might for kind of PACES, OSCE type things. And we would do it in the timed format, with one of us being the examiner, one the trainee, and then all feedback to each other. And I think that's probably really the best way to prepare, because number one, you learn from each other from your different experiences and what you would do in different situations. You have some interesting discussions. It's nice to have some social time anyway over lockdown, etc. So it was actually quite nice to be able to see each other every kind of couple of times a week. And you get used to doing it in the timed format, which is probably one of the most useful things that you can do. And all of the resources that Najet has mentioned are extremely useful. So the Trello board has everything that you would need to read, but I think also don't get overwhelmed by the Trello board. You don't need to have read everything that is on there. I think that it's more to direct you to areas where you might identify gaps while you're practicing, and that you can read a bit more information about those areas. I know that people panic about certain stations more than others. For me, it was definitely things like critical appraisal, but I have to say in the virtual format, it's probably much more manageable than it might have been previously, because you get the paper given to you about, I think, 5 days to a week before, and you also get the question, so you know the clinical question that you're answering in regards to the paper, so you can prepare that completely. And I just recommend using any critical appraisal tool that you're familiar with. CASP has good ones for all of the different studies, and just going through that with the paper and then practicing giving your feedback within the time frame and relating it to the
similar to Journal Club. It's not above a level of you presenting at a journal club. So don't get bogged down on stats and master's level stats. That's not the point of it, okay? And you definitely have time to prepare. Sorry to interrupt, Abby.
Yeah, no, 100% right. And also 8 minutes is not a lot of time to appraise a paper. So I had written tons and only got to say about half of it. So honestly, don't worry too much about that. There are a few questions about the virtual format, which I'll start with, and Najet chip in because I might have forgotten little practicalities of it. But you will get a really good talk from Steve from RCPCH, who will talk you through the format in great detail, and that's always recorded. So definitely watch that. They give you all of the information a few days before so that you can log into the system and practice using the system as well, like a dummy test run. And then it actually is fairly self-explanatory. You just click to move between different virtual rooms. The most challenging thing on the day is the timing. And the one thing that someone recommended in the START group was to make a table with your timings, which completely saved my life. And I would recommend that everyone does that. So once you get a few days before, you get the timings of all of your stations. So literally make a timing of when you would start the station, when your 4 minutes of reading is finished, and then when your 8 minutes are finished, because as the assessors said, they're also keeping their eye on the time for themselves. So you both have to time watch for yourselves, because it doesn't work like it would in real life where someone's knocking on the door or ringing a bell. So that was quite challenging, but completely manageable. And I just had my phone next to me with a stopwatch and my table of times so that I could manage things. Someone asked about things on the screen. Najet, I think you could still see the handout on the screen.
Yeah, you can. I mean, the screen itself can be a bit tricky to navigate, but to be honest, once you're in the flow and you're talking, you haven't got time for it, because it is a two-way conversation and it does feel like that. So initially I was worried about technology and stuff, and in the end, you just start talking as if you would with a colleague at work. And I know everyone says that, but it actually does feel like that. And sometimes you'll read the station and you'll be like, I don't know what they're getting at, but just go back to principles, how you would if you were in ED or on the ward with something. Go apply it how you would at work. And I know that sounds really obvious, but it's not there to trick you. It's not there to be like, oh, let's suddenly talk about a rare neurological disorder that only 1 in a million children have. That is not the point of this exam, which some of our written exams might have felt like. It's about seeing your thought processes, that you're safe, that you think of safeguarding, that you think about the team around you, that you think about pressures within the team. That's what it's about, which is why it is an assessment. It's not an exam, because you can prepare for it to a point, can't you? But actually it's about the day. And I would say that it does prepare you for that next level of thinking. And I think I got it more once I sat it, if that makes sense. I think the lead up, you're just like, oh my God, it's an exam, because we're so trainee focused like that. And I would say, as our study group, and I'm sure Abby won't mind me saying this, we were harsher on each other than the actual day, I thought.
Yeah,
God,
definitely.
it drilled me a lot in things. And I think so. And I think the tip about timings is crucial, because it can feel a bit like you don't know, you're running out of time and there's things you want to say. But again, don't get stressed about it. Go in, be yourself, show them your knowledge, show them how you can manage. And I actually think it's a good way of kind of working out how you manage things. And I think that's the point of it. And I wish I listened to people when they said it's not an exam, because I was like, yeah, right, whatever. It's an exam. You're just trying to catch me out, but it's not. So Abby, I think I wouldn't add anything else to that, but I would say that get into that group, because it is nice to have peer-on-peer support. And I actually missed it. It sounds really sad, but it was in lockdown, so I was really enjoying the fact. I was like, hi guys, and it came a bit of a sociable thing for us. And also don't. There's a lot of sometimes noise on the WhatsApp group, and people get fretting about stuff. And try not to be carried away by it. Just do what you need to do, and you'll all be fine. Other practical tips are. Have a bottle of water nearby, because there's not much time between stations, and you do get it sounds really obvious, but you get quite a dry mouth because you're talking. Have your phone nearby. There were 2 stations they had to ring me because they just lost internet connection, and that's absolutely fine. Don't stress about that. I'm being asked to stop. Okay, Sue, have you got any questions before you run off to cook? Any last questions for Sue before she runs off to Pilates? Shall I carry on?
Just so thank you very much, everyone. I think you've done a great summary, Jet and Abby, and the way that you presented it is exactly how it's supposed to feel. And we didn't used to run start preparation evenings, we just did it. And then everyone said we want to know what's going to happen. But in some ways it sort of makes the build up even worse. I seem to remember spending an evening with your study group, didn't I? One evening you invited me to your study group. Yeah.
I do believe there was wine.
Well, you might have had wine.
I think we had a few glasses is how we got through
probably
it.
had wine as well. Anyway, good luck, everybody. You don't need luck. Just do what you would normally do every day at work. That's all you have to remember.
Thank you so much, Sue. Enjoy Pilates.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Oh, that's great. I'm not sure I would add anything else, Abby. I think that's the other thing I would use the WhatsApp group for, though, is if you're struggling to find, if you're in a smaller area and you're struggling to find people prepping, just put something on the group to see, because everything's online anyway. See if anyone will pair up with you, or you can join people, because, you know, I think there is a bit of element of this where you have to prepare on your own, but there is a nice, I think, getting used to this interface and talking to a screen, although I think we've probably come, you know, quite far in using screens. So I would say that. And then the other tip I had was, I think that's it, actually. Abby, can you think of anything else?
The other couple of other practical tips, if it runs similar to how it ran for us, for the prescribing station, I think they sent it to you on the day of the exam, but kind of just before the station, because the feedback from the very first set was that it was quite difficult to read on the screen. So then you could print it out at home or have it on a separate screen on your phone in your email and look at that, because sometimes it's quite hard to look at it on the screen. And for prescribing, obviously it's not you prescribing, you are looking at someone else's prescriptions and kind of evaluating that, spotting errors, discussing kind of drug reactions, etc. And then a couple of people always ask about teaching. You only get the scenarios on the day in the session, but usually there are 3 options. They're all fairly generic things. I was kind of worried that it might be something really specialized or specific that I wouldn't know about and I'd look really stupid, but it's all things that you could teach, and usually teaching a medical student. So I wouldn't worry about the content at all. I would just practice how you structure the session within 8 minutes, because I think that's the most important element of that. And 8 minutes can be quite short depending on what you're teaching. So I think practicing how you do that effectively is probably the most important thing. And in that's the only station where you have a person as well as the assessor. So I just had, I think, one other student in there who I was teaching virtually. And handover always creates a bit of a kerfuffle. It's probably, for me, the least realistic station, because you're asked to look at quite a detailed handover sheet within 4 minutes and sort of make a plan. And I think just don't panic. There's a lot of information on that sheet and nobody can read and absorb all of that information within 4 minutes. So just go through it systematically and safely, like you would a safe handover at work. And, you know, I thought I'd done really badly on that station, for example, because I hadn't hit all the points and I knew I hadn't, but it was fine because they know the time you're working with. So just be safe and just be practical, like you would in real life. I think those were the most stations.
And I think and the teaching one, the way I would apply the teaching one is like you would do a micro teach on the ward. So you do a micro teach by saying, right, we're going to pick a topic. And this is what we're going to try and achieve in a small period of time. Make sure you have time to ask some questions back, because they are looking for you being interactive and not just didactic. Topics are super broad and you can go with it in whichever direction. You're not expected to have slides though. So don't worry about that. And it's not reinventing the wheel stuff. It's more to see how you would quickly do a micro teach on the ward round. So don't fret too much about that. There's nothing none of you can't do. The handover one, definitely, as Abby says, approach it like a safer handover. So, you know, who's the staffing, who's the sickest, who is there safeguarding on the ward, who have you got around to help you? And if you approach it in a systematic way, because that's what we do in real life, don't we? We want to know who the sickest is, who possibly needs escalation of care, and we want to know safeguarding, don't we? And then everything else, generally, we then balance around who we can see and we use our team, and that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for anything, you know, beyond that. And the feedback I got was very much that I could identify that, and that's what they were pleased with. So definitely don't, you will be overwhelmed with the amount of information, but do what you do with a handover sheet. When you come in for a night shift, you quickly skim, don't you? And you try and get a lay of the land very quickly. It's not dissimilar to that. So none of this is rocket science, I have to say. And prepare well. It's nothing no one can do though. And I really want you to take away from this Q&A that it's not an assessment to trick you. It's an assessment to bring the best out of you. And I don't think I believed it until I sat it, but I'm telling you now, someone that's just done it. And the online portfolio is a bit strange when you get going, but again, technology does sometimes fail, but don't stress, just get on your phone. They don't want you to come out negatively in this. They want to see the best of you.
Yeah, I would say I have awful Wi-Fi, and for the whole second half, I couldn't use the system properly, and they were all just FaceTime calls, and it was fine. It was completely fine. They give you everyone's number beforehand. Either you call them or they call you. People are expecting a couple of glitches along the way, and it was completely fine. So don't stress too much about the technical aspects, I would say. Someone asked if you can have notes, just in the chat, and you can have bits of paper and whatever you want really, but bear in mind you won't really be able to read much. So I literally just had that table, and I had a little like list of things I wanted to mention in stations in general. I think like Najet was mentioning about the structure, you know, thinking about safety, thinking about the individual and the team and the wider hospital. I just had a little list of things that I would think about in each station, but you don't have time to read like lots of notes. You only have 4 minutes. So don't, I think, overwhelm yourself, but you can have, you know, a couple of aids next to you.
Not much time, to be honest.
But there's not much time. Exactly.
I think we've got a hand up. Sharif, do you want to unmute?
Thank you.
Hi.
My name is Sharif. I'm one of the East of England trainees. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I just want to know, what are the sources usually that we need to look for or to start with? So what is there any recommended website to read? Is it the GMC website just to read about topics like duty of control, or?
I mean, the GMC key documents are a good thing to read anyway if you're preparing to be a consultant, because you get asked about them at consultant level. But what I would say is the Trello board, which I think Katie's put a link to, has it all. And the way the Trello board's set up is it's set up to say consent and confidentiality, teaching. It's got a bit on ethics. So if you just go through those subsections, it's got loads on policy, loads on legal things. There's duty of candor stuff on there. There's GMC documents on there. There's some how to effectively teach. There's a good document on there. People have added to it. So I would encourage you so we can build upon this for the future. If you find a really interesting document, upload it. So our group uploaded a few things that we came across, because the whole thing is evolved by trainee input. So I can't take credit for that Trello board. I adopted it, and it's the only reason it's there is because of trainees starting it up. So it's got pretty good documentation. And to be honest, I still look at it, and I've done my start because it's got really useful documents on it. How do you access it? The Trello board, they're putting it in the chat now. So, and that's open to anyone that wants to join it. We haven't made that a London-centric thing. It was born out of London School of Pediatrics though, but we're more than happy to share it nationally with people.
So I can find it on the WhatsApp group, basically, right?
The WhatsApp groups. If you go to the WhatsApp group, in the top, in the bit, there's a link just to if you know the information bit. We've popped it in there.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
No, good luck.
There's another quick question from a few people saying, can they use the BNFC online app?
You won't need to, because they give you the what's it called, formulary thing for the drug, and I would just use that so you don't confuse yourself, because they've given you the information they want you to know for that particular drug. So
it's
you get a
from there anyway. So
exactly. So you don't need the BNF.
Okay, great. And I think there's someone else who would like to ask a question. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you for the session. My name is Xanthipi. I'm one of the trainees from East of England as well. I have two questions, please. One is for the teaching. Do we still have 4 minutes to prepare? Yes, okay. Thank you. And the other question is, I'm also a grid trainee. Out of the 12 stations, there will be 4 on our subspecialty, I understand. Will these be clinical scenarios? And does that mean that we will have no clinical scenario on general peds?
No, so what I just did whilst Najet and Abby were talking was to go back and look, because of the trainees that CCT this winter with us, quite a few of them did the assessment in November. So I went on to one of the grid trainees, as a CCH grid trainee, and just looked at her start. And there were 3 scenarios that were relating to CCH specific. So there was stuff on a child that came in with sensory hearing loss at 18 months, and et cetera, et cetera. So I could see 3 scenarios relating to that subspecialty, but there was also another scenario, and I couldn't tell whether that was necessarily, because it was a safeguarding scenario, but then safeguarding will be generic as well as relating to, so I at least 3 clinical scenarios that were subspecialty. Someone had asked in the chat if the assessors would be subspecialists. I imagine they will be, because obviously they're not going to, a general pediatrician will have not have perhaps the level of knowledge that's needed for that subspecialty station. So I imagine it probably is. So I hope that's answered the question.
Thank you. And there are still 12 rather than 10, you said.
Yeah, so I've just checked again. It said for October they did 10, but they're reverting to 12 stations. So that's what's on the website. And I would, in addition to the Trello board, I think I would really advise you to look at the college website. There's a lot of very detailed information there that would be really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. There's another question that's probably best directed to yourself, Anne, saying, is there any hope of going back to face-to-face?
Oh, don't we all want to know the answer to that question? I think the college has been absolutely fab in sorting out remote interviews and assessments and exams. But today the general feeling of disquiet was rising, and I think that there is a willingness to move to face-to-face. Certainly with the college, maybe not HEE, but the college are desperate to get to face-to-face when they can.
Thank you. And Katie, just if you could post the links again for people who'd like access to the Trello board and to the WhatsApp group.
Just to emphasize for the clinical stations, I'm general pediatrics, so I don't know about grid, but they're all clinical scenarios that incorporate other aspects, kind of non-technical skills. So there's conflict within them, safeguarding within them, leadership within them. There's limited focus on the clinical management of things. So I think don't stress about kind of re-revising everything you would have done for clinical exams, because it's not that type of assessment. It's very much about how you manage complicated scenarios and how you think them through and talk about them.
Right then, I'm conscious of the time. Is there any other questions before we think about wrapping up? Or does everyone feel absolutely ready? You will. So I think if no one's got any burning questions, I think it's 7:15, and I'm conscious it's people's evening time. So I will thank everyone for being here. Do join the groups, do join the Trellos, and it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And also just thank you to everyone for giving their evenings up, because I really appreciate it. I've got a screaming toddler.
Oh, Nadette, thank you so much for hosting this, guys.
So thank you, and thanks for everyone for inputting. My poor husband is so I'm gonna have to go because story time beckons. I'm happy for everyone to carry on though, because I know the gang knew I might have to do this. So if people do want to stay and have questions, then that's fine. But I'm gonna have to run.
Oh, well, thank you, Najette. And there are recordings from the previous evening that you guys put together, which was fantastic. Yeah. And I feel very bad because I haven't really contributed very much, but thank you.
No, everyone, you've just been brilliant. And thank you, Anne, for coming and giving us that kind of, LSP deanery perspective, because that's really important. And also thank you to people who've come from outside London, because I'm getting text messages from across the country, particularly hello to the Scottish folk, which is super exciting, and East of England. So thank you. But this is very much a London School of Pediatric thing, but we're more than happy for you guys to join because it is a national assessment and it's power in numbers. So thank you, everybody.
And I've just done a shameless plug because we've got a few spaces left for our QI Change Champions programme this spring. And actually, if you're thinking about START, not this time round, but next time, it will give you some really good skills and tools and things that you can use for START. So I'm shamelessly using this plug to say, if you're a London trainee, it's HE funded, so do sign up. We've just got a few places left, and it's ideal for your level of training. It will really set you up for consultant interview.
Fab. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Bye.